Come on in to Margaret McSweeney's Kitchen for Kitchen Chat, where every week you'll meet chefs, cookbook authors, foodies, gourmets, and just plain people who love to eat. And along with laughter, chat, recipes, and stories about food, you'll sometimes also hear words of inspiration, love, and hope. As Margaret always says, Kitchen Chat is food for the senses and food for the soul. So grab a cup of coffee, put your feet up on a comfy chair, and get ready to spend a little time with Margaret and her friends.
Hello, dear foodie friends, and welcome to Kitchen Chat. I'm your host, Margaret McSweeney, and I'm so excited you're joining me today in the beautiful Middleby Residential Viking and La Cruz showroom here in the Merchandise Mart. Of course, someone who needs no introduction, my co-host, Chef Jamie Larita.
I guess I need no introduction.
And we are so excited for you to meet today's guest, Veronica Hinke, who is the author of a very fabulous and popular new book about the Titanic. And we're going to learn about the food on this ship. So welcome to Kitchen Chat.
Thank you, Margaret and Jamie. It's really great to be here. I'm so glad to be able to talk with everyone about my new book. It's a look at the Titanic through the lens of style, culinary, so food and drinking, and also fashion and music. And they are hot off the presses as of yesterday.
Wow.
And so
these things still have, the ink is still wet, Veronica.
The ink is still wet.
The ink is still wet.
Fresh copies.
So thank you so much. So the last night on the Titanic, unsinkable drinking, dining, and style.
Yes.
Wow. And what inspired this topic?
Well, over the years, I have spent a great deal of time and told a great deal of stories, hundreds of food stories. And at the core of everyone, at the heart of everyone, it's always about the people. And what better people to write about than these incredible people who survived or experienced terrible things before the sinking of the Titanic. These people were amazing, and so many people tucked away menus in their jacket pockets. One man even wrote a long letter home on his first day on the Titanic, writing in detail each menu item he had for lunch that day. He wrote it to his wife, and
before Instagram.
Right.
I'm actually going to prevent an accident on the water, because I think Margaret's going to sink that ship right there.
Thank you for thinking of that. I didn't even see that.
You know what I'm saying? That was like an iceberg. Knuckles, Margaret, knuckles. Give me some knuckles.
Okay.
So what, tell me about this. So this is like the last night on the Titanic, literally, like the menu from the last night, the recipes?
Right, the menu from the last night. Of course, that last first-class menu has been very celebrated throughout the years, and much in part due to the fabulous book by Rick Archbold and Dana McCauley, The Last Dinner on the Titanic. Mm-hmm. This book adds other different looks at menus, from even the crew menu, like 107 years ago today. The Titanic was on her sea trials. And guess what? There was a beautiful menu for that as well. Today, April 3rd, 1912, she was on her second day of sea trials, and each day had a different menu. On the April 2nd menu, what I thought was really neat, this is the kind of thing I learned through researching the book, the people that planned the menu for the crew thought of little things, little touches to honor them, like plover on toast. Plover is a seabird, so they were paying homage to these people that had dedicated their lives to working on the sea, and I like that. I think that's really neat.
It's beautiful. Well, I'm just so curious, the food, and we're going to get to the menu, but the preparation, because these were the days before you had these wonderful equipment, commercial ovens and everything. How did they prepare this at all? How did they prepare meals on the Titanic?
Well, it's, no irony that we're here in the showroom here, because this is state of the art in the modern times here where we are today talking. And in the time of the Titanic, all of the cooking ranges and even the ice cream and sorbet makers were state of the art, the newest thing out of
products,
the...
probably.
Yes.
Today they probably would have been. Right.
Tell me how these chefs got involved with these recipes.
Well, it was really fun. You know, I was able to bring in some of the chefs that I've worked with over the years, and made a lot of new friends. I found folks from as far away as Johannesburg, South Africa, if you can believe it, because I was looking for a recipe for tripe and onions, which is what they were eating in third class in steerage. They had things like gruel, if you can imagine, on the menu.
Gruel.
And
What exactly is gruel?
Margaret, we should make some gruel.
I don't know if I want to. What exactly is gruel? I mean, that was like in the Oliver story. I remember.
Yeah.
Is it?
I think of it like a watered down oatmeal. Isn't that kind of how you think of gruel? Like and maybe it's a little bit enhanced with different ingredients more than just that, but I think basically it's
gruel.
Yeah. So, and you know, we look at first, second, and third classes, and even in steerage on the Titanic, the accommodations and food were much better than on any other steamship during the day. This was like the first of its kind of a ship. There was even an ice cream maker on board. And he was a young man, 19 years old, from Inwil, Switzerland. And he told his parents, he said, you know, I need to make this crossing on the Titanic. He said, when I'm done with this crossing, I will be able to get a job in culinary in any of the best hotels in London. That's what the Titanic meant to people at the time. It was that important.
Did he survive?
He did not. Yeah, he did not. And I'm so...
Well, you know why? He did survive, because we're talking about him today.
Exactly. I was just thinking that myself, that this project, the book, the talking with people, you know, sharing it like today on Kitchen Chat, it is very much like that.
Yeah, you're bringing the kitchen back to life. You're bringing the boat back to life. I can almost feel, you know, you're taking me to that culinary place. Like, I could almost feel like what it would be like in the kitchens, feeding that many people.
And look what I just happened to open up on. This is too funny. Called Margaret's Fruit Cup.
I thought I was Margaret's Fruit Cup.
And you just opened. You just opened up to that page.
And here it is.
Let's see what
That
mine
is wonderful, Margaret.
Nothing. I got women and children first.
Well, that's...
Be brave no matter what happens. Be brave.
Yes.
I like that.
Nice.
And that was...
That's a little message for me, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so true. When I was halfway through this project, someone called me at work one day and said that my mother had just died suddenly and unexpectedly, and she was in perfect health. And I was just starting to get back into the book project, and I was diagnosed with triple-negative breast cancer. And I'm through it now. I'm doing good, and I had a great care team, wonderful surgeons and treatment care. But this book, one of the most surprising things about this book project was that the people that I was researching and writing, the people that I was telling the stories of, their stories just really kept me strong, brave, uplifted, and encouraged. And
wow, it's amazing.
I hope that the book will do that for everyone who reads it.
I love that. And first of all, congratulations for having breast cancer behind you. And as the listeners and viewers know, I'm almost a 7-year survivor with breast cancer.
I know that.
Yes. And Kitchen Chat was what gave me that passion to get through it. So I understand. And we are celebrating your book. So,
wow.
Yes. So congratulations.
Thank you. And you too.
Thank you.
So this is, we'll get back to a little bit of talking about your book and how exciting and the things that are upcoming for the book. But we have a past. You know, you've been involving me in a lot of the articles that you've been writing. So what else do you do? Tell our listeners, what else do you do besides writing just this cookbook?
Well, I write feature stories and mostly food stories. And I have to say, when I tell people how at the core of every food story, it's about the people, that is so true with you and the food stories that I've written over the years about Jamie. One day I left after this fabulous feast of pasta and figs, and I had this great recipe, and it was just this amazing meal. He's never made anything that I haven't just absolutely loved. I'm usually just drooling over the Instagram posts and everything that I see going on down here, and it works. But when I think back on, that first time, our first story together, I think about the birds that you rescued and the shower that you had for your dogs so that they can come in and clean their paws off when they've got salt on their feet. And that's what I mean about food stories.
The birds you rescued, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so I went into a pet shop, and there was a fish tank, literally a fish tank, with a line of birds inside the fish tank. And that's where they were living, in a fish tank. And I walked into the store and I said, "What's this about?" She said, "Oh, they're not important, they're just breeders. We just breed them." I said, "And then you shove them back in the fish tank?" She said, "Well, yeah, they're not really for sale." I said, "I'll take all of them." So I took all the birds, and I built this I found this amazing cage, and I built this world for them where they weren't just breeders. I felt so bad for these parakeets, but yeah, that's what happened.
Yeah.
I love that story. Thank you for highlighting that story.
Yeah, but you write for lots of different newspapers and magazines. So tell me how you got your start in culinary.
Well, I had been writing as a stringer with the New York Post and I'd been doing a lot of hard news, breaking news here in Chicago, a lot of different crime stories and so forth, and also with the Associated Press and feature stories. And so through that, I was able to, I forget when it was, I think it was in 2005 maybe, I started getting assigned stories from Pioneer Press, which is now part of the Tribune Media Services company, and food stories. And I just love it. It's just a joy to be able to learn about things like that. And that's a good example of what I'm talking about, that, you go in there it's all about the recipe. It's all about how is the food prepared. And you end up learning about the people behind the recipe.
And I like to say that that energy is the flavor, right? And it's the people how they spin the pot that makes the recipe great. I always say that. That's how you spin the pot.
Well, I would love to jump into the menu. What was the final meal served on the Titanic?
Well, one of the courses that's probably best known is very popular. It's the punch romaine. Have you guys heard of that before? It's a champagne sorbet, and it's frozen. And I have a story to share about that. In my research, I looked in newspapers and found a woman in Murraysville, Pennsylvania, who had had one of these last night Titanic dinner parties for her friends. And she said, the only SOS I want to hear is send out seconds. So she was just the neatest lady to talk with on the phone. I talked to her about a year and a half ago, and she provided a couple of the recipes for the book. Her name is Marjorie Beretta, and that was one of the items that we wanted to make sure we included, because from my perspective anyway, as a food reporter, that's one thing on the menu that is just ubiquitous, and it's like the one thing that you have to have when you have a Titanic dinner party. And then, there are so many other different elements to the dinner as well. Chocolate eclairs were the dessert that night, and I'm really thrilled that a Chicago chef, and a number of Chicago chefs are in the book, and one of them is someone who contributed a recipe for chocolate eclairs, and it's by Gail Gand.
Oh, I love Gail. We love Gail.
Yes.
We had Gail on our show.
Yes, and Gail contributed that recipe for chocolate eclairs, which is fabulous, and also for apple meringue, which is such a cozy, sort of old English type of, but still lovely treat. It's still prevalent today. And the chocolate eclairs are pretty special because I spoke with the great niece of Charles Jockin, the chief baker, who survived, has an incredible story, that he was actually, even though he was baker on the Titanic, he was actually by trade a pastry chef, like Gail. Very fine pastries that he made. He would make beautiful christening cakes and top them with hand-blown sugar ornaments that he would make for his nieces and nephews. He would make mincemeat pies and just lovely, lovely foods. So one of the things that his great niece told me about was his terrific chocolate eclairs. And so that's a recipe that is really in honor of Charles. And Charles had an amazing story as chief baker. He had come over to the Titanic from her sister ship, the Olympic, as many of the crew did. And he survived that night. He's the man that we see in both Titanic movies that have been popular through the years. Of course, there was that movie from the 1950s, based on the Walter Lord book, A Night to Remember, and then, of course, the very popular James Cameron movie, Titanic. And in that movie, we see Charles holding onto a railing, and he has a bottle in his hand and a baker cap on. And I don't know if either of you recall that, but some people see that as like a sort of a comic relief element to that movie. And there's always been a story handed down through time that he was drinking whiskey, and that's how he was able to survive. That's what people have said. Of course, that's not true, but that's sort of the urban myth, the legend. And his niece confirmed to me that he was actually drinking schnapps. He explained that he was drinking schnapps. He tread water for 2 hours. He threw deck chairs into the water because when he saw that all the lifeboats had gone, he thought, if I can get all these deck chairs into the water, I might have one thing I can hang on to when I'm in there in the water. And what's really amazing to me is that the Thursday before the Titanic sunk on a Sunday night. And the Thursday before, Charles had checked his station chart to see where he was going to be if needed, if there was a crisis, what lifeboat was he going to be manning. And he noted the number of the lifeboat, and then when he went to get it boarded with the people in it, to help the people get in, it was loaded, ready to go, and he did not get the command to board the lifeboat. And he knew his chance was gone at that point of survival. But he made it. A cook held his hand out to Charles from a lifeboat, and he said, hold me hand. And Charles held his hand for a great deal of time, probably close to an hour, and then another lifeboat came along and said, we have room for 10 more, and Charles got on. And then when he got on the Carpathia, the boat that braved through iceberg-infested waters to pick these people up, he said, I was so cold that they popped me into the oven like one of my own pies. Yeah, so an incredible story of the baker. And the chocolate eclairs that's how the whole book is sort of
That's amazing.
strategized.
So I feel like this book is going to sail into the bestseller, chart.
Well, today is its second day as #1 in new releases on Amazon in gastronomy history.
Wow.
And Monday it was #1 in Amazon new releases in maritime history. So that was good to see.
Yeah.
And
I imagine that it's going to be, there are a lot of people that are infatuated with the Titanic, and I imagine that this is going to become somewhat of a gift, or if you're one of those people that loves history and food, I think that this is a perfect gift for somebody. I can't wait. I love it. I mean, the way it's written, I love all the little like fleur-de-lis. It seems like this little design aspect that's on the book. Was there anything like as far as the design of the book that you can tell us about? That was how did you choose the cover and all of that? Well,
first of all, I just want to mention the reason I'm glad it's doing well is because these people, their stories, just to getting those out is amazing. I'm so glad it's doing well. Yeah,
you're resurrecting.
Yeah,
and the wonderful recipes.
Yeah,
honored them. Yes.
The design, the graphic designers with Regnery Publishing put this together, and we went through many rounds of. Should we do this? Should we do that? And then the end result was this, and I absolutely have been amazed by the great comments people are making about the design. People really like it.
As someone that loves design, I love the vintage look and feel of the book.
The unsinkable Molly Brown that's featured here.
Well, she could be.
Okay.
And Molly, actually, some people think of Molly as a bigger person, more robust, and this is a she was actually more slender. Margaret Brown, her nickname was Molly, was pretty darn incredible. You know, Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers said after a disaster, his mother would say to him, Fred, when there's a disaster, look for the helpers. You will always find helpers. And that's what pulled him through. He shared that after 9/11, that's his, you know, that was his way of coping, was thinking about the helpers. And I am reminded of Molly when I think of that, because Molly was organizing the women in her lifeboat to row, to stay warm. Those people were freezing, and she would say, ladies, you know, we're going to take turns rowing. We're going to have a schedule of when we're going to row through the night. And then once she was aboard the Carpathia, the rescue ship, she was thinking of others again, even though she was in this terrible state, going through this horrific experience. She organized a group of mostly men at the time. There were mostly men that were sort of the, you know, the power-wielding people that were in her social circle. And she organized them so that they could honor Captain Rostron, who was the captain of the Carpathia, because he didn't have to go in to the iceberg-infested waters. And he did. So another case of people that put others first when their own life could have been in danger. So Molly, not only that, but for us, people who loved to hear about what are people doing with food and so forth, Molly was known for inventing an electric serving cart. And it was quite elaborate, and she would use it for her fabulous dinner parties and, you know, cocktail parties. Well, actually not cocktail, but more like tea time parties she'd have. She was a teetotaler. And she lived in a really beautiful house in Denver, and I've been to it, the Molly Brown house. I highly recommend a visit if you're ever in Denver. It's beautiful. And she was just a queen of entertaining, and invented little canapes that
And is this the Margaret's fruit cup?
Yes, that's hers.
I love that.
Yeah, it's two Margarets. Yeah.
Wow.
Very neat story.
I thought I was a queen of entertaining.
And you are, Jamie. You are. And I can only imagine, you know, speaking of style, and you have such great style,
Oh,
Jamie.
thank you, Margaret.
What was the style like on the Titanic? Is it similar to what has been portrayed in the movies, or through your research did you discover something unexpected?
I really didn't discover anything. I think one of the things I confirmed was pretty interesting in that John Jacob Astor IV had several restaurants in hotels, or hotels with restaurants in them, rather. And you had to have a tuxedo on. And if you didn't, there was a tailor there to make a tuxedo for you. There's a laundry list, literally, of clothing and other items that one gentleman claimed on his insurance claim. And it was everything from, it really told, it's included in the book, it really told what these people were packing in their trunks. One woman had 19 trunks. She talked about this guy that wrote up this list had walking sticks, top hats. You know, this was.
I can't imagine what I would have brought.
Yeah.
Oh, you would have been the talk of the Titanic, I'm sure, with your fashion and you'd be in the kitchen tasting everything.
Oh, no, for sure.
For sure.
And I see some of the great people. You have Chef Art Smith.
Oh, yes.
Did something nice for you there on the back. And Yvonne Hume.
Yes.
Great niece of the Titanic's first violinist, John Hume.
Yeah.
Of Scotland.
And did they really continue to play? Because you see all the movies portray that they were playing to the last. Did you find out about that at all?
Well, we talk about it in the book.
Okay.
And there's a great deal of I don't want to say controversy, but there are different eyewitness accounts of what people thought. The fashion journalist Edith Rosenbaum Russell was on board, and she was outspoken, saying, you know, there's no way they would have been playing Near My God to Thee. It would have killed the spirits of the people that were in the midst of this terrible drama and tragedy, which I guess made sense to me. I thought, yeah, they probably wouldn't have played a song like that when they were in the midst of what they were experiencing. But there was one thing that I read in a book. I read about a dozen books as part of my research, and and you mentioned Yvonne Hume, and it was a relative of hers who was the first violinist, and his name was Jock Hume, and he ran into someone in the stairwell and said, "We're just going to go play some music to cheer people up." So that is more in line, I think, with what we would have expected them to do, is, cheering people up. But that was sort of right in the beginning of the experience. At 11:40 is when the Titanic struck the iceberg, and it was probably around a little after midnight when that was, where he ran into Violet Jessup in the hallway and told her that. So they definitely were focused on playing music that would calm people and keep their mind off things. But, in the very beginning, there wasn't a real rush to the lifeboats. People were not thinking it was going to be quite so serious as it was. That is one of the reasons that some of the lifeboats went out and they weren't completely full.
Tragic.
Yeah.
What was your favorite recipe from the Titanic? What really resonated with you as a food historian, as someone who has that culinary background? What really resonated with you?
Well, I really love the eclairs. I think that's just, I do love that. And I
kind of felt that eclair energy.
I'm hungry for eclairs.
I know, I've got that on my brain too. But I loved the tripe and onions, actually, in the appreciation for it. Not the flavor, I don't think necessarily for my taste, but the whole process of, getting to know people who make it and hearing about their stories, how their family made it and passed the recipe down through the years. That was pretty special to me. But I have to say that it's another hometown person here in the Chicago area, Michael Lashowitz, contributed a recipe for something that wasn't necessarily a menu item on the Titanic, but he took a menu item, which was English spring peas, and he has a lovely English spring peas soup and an English spring peas souffle recipe, and those are both in the book.
I might try this souffle.
And you have made me spring pea soup.
I sure have.
Yes. Wow.
Maybe next time it'll be one of my recipes. Just saying, Veronica.
I have a picture of this bright green soup and souffle. It just shouts out spring. It's just beautiful. So I love how that happened in the book, to have these spring ingredients. There's rhubarb, there's asparagus, so it's a nice tribute to spring.
And then also back to the food, because I'm just trying to envision the kitchen, the storage. They did not have the amenities of what we have today, equipment-wise, storage-wise. Do they have refrigeration systems? How did they feed that many people for such a long time with a caliber? It's a moving restaurant, essentially.
Isn't it amazing? And they did. They had the electricity, so they had refrigeration.
Okay.
Probably not like what we know of today, obviously, but something very close. And I always think about our wide-body airplanes, and or even the small airplanes today, but for sure the ones that fly across the ocean. I can't believe how they fit all of that stuff into those airplanes, into the galleys, and it's, in these little carts, and they come out and you end up with this fabulous feast. But it was a catering kitchen basically in the ship, and bakery, and it was incredible. There were, different areas for people, like the ice cream maker that I mentioned.
Oh.
So it's unbelievable. People called it a floating palace, and it really was.
Life tips or cooking tips? Your top three.
The first one would be that pea soup recipe, because it's very simple and it produces a vibrant spring pea color, spring green color, I should say, that just is perfect for parties. You can have a little bit of soup. We're having a party this Saturday up in my hometown in Wausau, Wisconsin, and we're going to put a little bit of the soup in coupe glasses. Won't that be pretty? So you can just pass those around and everyone can have a little spoon with it. So I would say things like that are, simple. I would say think of your garnishes. This time of year, find someplace where you can find spring pea tendrils and just, put them all over your array of foods that you're having for your party or whatever. And then third, I would say, again, I'm going to revert back to, take an interest in people, in your guests, and, hear their stories and, make things that they like.
That's really great. I think just like fingerprints, everyone has a different fingerprint. Everyone has a different story. And I feel like, when you invest in hearing what that story is, we're all very unique and we all have a different one. So.
That is true. Yeah. And speaking of sharing stories, thank you for sharing not only your story, and we're cheering for you as you continue to keep cancer behind you.
Yes.
But thank you for sharing the stories, the food stories, but most importantly, the stories of the people on the Titanic. So thank you, Veronica. Really appreciate that. And thank you, Jane. And thank you, dear foodie friends, for joining us on this exciting culinary journey. Make sure you visit the Titanic in this incredible book by Veronica Hinke. Go to Amazon.com. And do you have a website you want to share?
Well, I'm on Instagram at Foodstringer. And Twitter as well, at Foodstringer.
Perfect. And you can always find Jamie on Instagram at Jamie Larita and myself, Kitchen Chat. But if you're in Chicago, make sure you drop by the Merchandise Mart and see Jamie here in the beautiful Middleby Residential Showroom, Viking in La Cornue. And I hope you'll visit their Facebook page, Viking, as well as thevikinglife.com, and visit me in my kitchen, kitchenchat.info. And always remember to take a moment and savor the day.
Thanks for joining Margaret for Kitchen Chat today. Margaret would be so excited for you to drop by and visit with her at kitchenchat.info, where you'll enjoy podcasts, blogs, recipes, tips from chefs, and even great giveaways. She invites you to share your recipes and kitchen stories too. As Margaret always says, savor the day.